Can you make an action film for $10,000 and actually make it look good? Today, I sat down with filmmaker James Couche, who shares his incredible story of making an action film for just $10,000 during the pandemic and then adapting it into a piece of media I bet you won't expect. We dive deep into the realities of filmmaking, struggling with budgets, fighting through setbacks, working with non actors, finding creative ways to just keep the dream alive, and what happens when you finally get distribution but the money isn't what you expected. We also talk about transparency in the indie film world, advice for first time filmmakers, and the importance of making lots of work and why failure is often just the beginning. Here's my interview with James Couche. I figured, why don't you give me a little bit of your filmmaking background here to get started?
I got started probably about the way that pretty much everybody did. Well, a lot of people did. I did stop motion in my backyard. I had basically. I realized recently I've always been making action movies, whether it's making dinosaurs fight or having Lego hovercrafts battle each other. That was my earliest stuff, but I didn't really get into making proper short films until college. And from there as horror action movies and kind of started in 2005 when it was mini DV cameras and the crappiest editing software you can imagine, stuff like Windows Movie Maker. And I just kept on doing it. It's this June will be 20 years since I started making movies. And a few years ago, during the pandemic, when everybody was working on their sourdough starters or becoming like billionaires in Animal Crossing, I made a feature-length action thriller for $10,000 called Lost Phoenix. If you had told me 10 years ago, yeah, a global pandemic is going to be the thing that gets you to make your first feature, I don't know how I would have felt about that. But I think that making that film kept me sane, and it kind of brought me out of the depression I was feeling during that time. And so it's, forever thankful for having that to distract my brain and to really just kind of make me feel like I could still be a filmmaker even when the world was shut down.
So when you reached out to me, you told me about your 10K action film. I watched the trailer for it and I'm like, I got to talk to this guy, right? Like how I made my film, my little drama film for 15,000, right? And you managed to film an entire action film for $10,000, right? So what made you think that you could pull that off?
Because I've been doing from 2005 onward, I've been making action movies for nothing, 20 bucks and a Slurpee kind of thing. And so I got over the years, I got really, really good at figuring out well, here are my resources. Here's what I can do with those resources. And I got really kind of oh, well, hey, I spent 50 bucks and this thing turned out really well. I wonder if I could keep on building that. And I also was at that point in the process of getting experimental with production style. Okay, getting it getting a sound person, getting a good sound person is not cheap. It's also a very difficult, thankless job. But what if I used wireless lav mics? How would that play out? If I knew I served as my own DP because I knew here's how I can make things look big and epic and fancy without necessarily needing to have the big, epic, fancy, and expensive support gear. So I literally tailored this movie to my experience and also my strengths, so that I think that if anyone else had tried to make this, I don't know if it would have gone as well, but I kind of specifically had it tailored to what I was good at.
So you mentioned that the pandemic kind of gave you an opening to make this feature. What specifically changed for you during this time?
To be honest, this is my third attempt at the feature. The first one fell apart a week before we started filming, which was just brutal, but it taught me a lot. So you get up, dust yourself off, and you try again. And we had been filming my second attempt at the feature for about 6 months before lockdown started. And it soon became clear there was no way we were going to be able to finish it. And so I had to let that go, which was not great for my depression, by the way. But I was I had this weird dark thought. What would it be like if someone woke up now in 2020 with amnesia, and they have no idea how anything got this way. In fact, they barely remember a world that didn't involve all this stuff. And that was kind of the like, well, okay, well, I could do this. And when people have fight scenes, they put masks on. If when there's lots of communication through technology, lots of outdoor locations. And I think what really changed was I had failed twice, but I learned so much from both of those failures. And so I was able to basically apply all of that to this film. And I think the rest of it was just perseverance. Um, I think a lot of us during that time realized, life is too short. You need to go for it now. And so I think that's kind of what changed for me too was, just go for it. And I, in all honesty, the film cost about $10,000. I never had more than $2,500 in the bank for this movie. So I was literally, but I realized I could wait and try to, build up that $10,000. But that's however many months or years of being able to things to go wrong, talk myself out of it, come out, get distracted by other ideas. I realized just do it and figure it out as you go. So as I was shooting, we filmed a proof of concept in October of 2020. And then by May of the following year, we were starting to work on the full feature, but I kept running out of money. It was kind of like a reminder of my days of being a dirt poor college student and having to figure out like what bills can I put off that so I can actually like afford to eat this week. And that's kind of the experience of making this movie. You know, I would very strategically put my resources where I needed to. And then by the time the money ran out, it's like, oh, cool. Well, summer's hit and Virginia summers are brutal and kind of dangerous. So let's go on hiatus and we'll pick back up in the fall. And that gave me, 2 months to find more money. And so that was kind of the ebb and flow of the movie was just figure it out. I think I also learned don't be super precious about things. Like so much about this movie changed midstream. But the ironic thing is every time I had to make a compromise due to like resources or time or whatever, the movie would just get better for it. It's like, oh, I can't, well, I'm not able to do this cool set piece. I'm not going to replace it with a lesser set piece. I'm going to replace it with something that's a bit more character based. And the movie benefited from that as opposed to me being able to like throw, a pseudo car chase into the films. Like, nope, I can't do that. So let's do something else and really kind of, dig more into the characters and kind of raise the stakes that way.
You said you tried to film this movie 2 other times specifically?
Not this movie. It was two different movies. The first one was an action movie called Fallen Blade, which I would still like to make. And it's an anthology where the majority of the story is told from the perspective of outsiders who are drawn into this conflict. And you don't really follow the kind of the protagonist until like the last chapter when you really kind of get a sense of like the actual conflict that he's having with like former associates. The second one was a bit more of a drama, and that one bit trickier. I kind of realized after the fact, like, yeah, I made try to do an indie film with like 30 locations. That's just not going to happen on a micro budget. But the cool thing is because of those experiences and the things I learned, I think that's what kind of set me up to succeed the third time out. Even if you know like even if you have a pandemic you're dealing with, even if it limits the amount of time that you can train with your actors to kind of because most of the people in this movie, the majority of them had never done fight scenes, at least not like these. So I had to teach them the basics. So like, okay, here's how to give and receive a movie hit, and here's footwork and you know rhythm, and then also the biggest one is like you're not that person you're fighting is not your opponent, they're your scene partner. And so we weren't able to do like super like high level Hong Kong level fights, but the fights we did make were really high impact, and it all sells. Like it kind of has this like 90s American action movie vibe. Kind of like before Hong Kong came in, before John Wick came along. And I think that having, you know, teaching my actors the basics and then working with them based on their strengths, uh, was definitely the way to go. Like I had one actor who trained capoeira for 10 years. If anyone who's not familiar with that, it's the style that Eddie Gordo uses in Tekken 3. My main villain is really, really good with a katana. So the movie ends with a sword fight because of that. So anybody who comes with something like, all right, how do I incorporate what you bring into your character and also into the movie? So yeah, just a lot of resource filmmaking.
Before we move on, I wanted to quickly go over some of the ways that you can support me. The easiest way is subscribing to my channel and watching my latest videos. I've also started a membership program that gives you early access to videos before they go live. It starts at just $3 a month on YouTube and Patreon, and if memberships aren't your thing, you can buy individual posts directly on Patreon without the membership fee. My feature film Cashing Out is available to watch on major platforms like Amazon and Apple TV, and you can even watch for free on platforms like Tubi, Plex, and YouTube. If you want to support directly, there's a pay what you want option on my own OTT platform that starts at just $2. And if you do watch the film, it would mean the world to me to leave a review on IMDb, Letterboxd, or your favorite platform. Lastly, if you're interested in my future film projects, you can sign up for my email list. I have some exciting new films that I can't wait to share with you all. All of these items will be linked in the description below. Thank you so much for the support. Now let's get back to the show. So, what would you say was your biggest fear with making this movie, and did that fear end up coming true?
I think I mean, my biggest fear was like not finishing again, like just completely having it fall apart. And it's like, well, that's three failures. The other one, and this was mostly during editing, was the absolute paranoia. Like, is this all going to make sense? I'd done nothing with shorts up to that point. So here I am editing an 85-minute movie. And okay, this scene's pretty good, but the scenes are all coming out really well. But like, is this all going to work together? And I watched my first assembly cut and panicked, just absolute panic. But I remembered, learning about David Sandberg, just saying like, if you watch your first cut of the movie and you don't panic, there's something wrong. So pulled it back in, reworked it, sent some stuff to my assistant editor who basically was like, oh, well, you should maybe cut this scene down like a lot. But yeah, basically you your first edit's always going to be a mess. And embrace that panic, but know that you have something and now you can fine tune it. You can refine it into something that is much better. And I look back on some of those the early cuts and it's like, man, it's like a different movie now with all of with all the changes that were made.
So, when it comes to your budgets, how would you say you pulled off all the action? Like, where did you not, like, absolutely not cut corners, and where did you have to get kind of scrappy?
I've always been really good at filming and getting a lot done in a very short span of time. Like I said, I was experimenting with production style, so I created this really super efficient production style, so that it can light it fast. Or the camera was relatively lightweight. It was a Blackmagic Pocket 4K. The lighting was relatively lightweight. Most of the movie, over half the movie is shot at night, which that's another level of challenge added on top of everything. But I think a lot of it was just yeah, sometimes if I realized, okay, this particular aspect of a fight scene isn't working, I was okay with making changes. I was okay with like, this isn't working. Let's be adaptable. Let's be fluid and let's try something else. And we wouldn't get bogged down on trying to get one thing right. Okay, 20, 30 takes later and the actors are still not getting it. Like, no, let's adapt it. And I think that's what really helped was if something wasn't quite working, I was very quick to adapt and very quick to kind of make a change when needed. There would I remember on our last day, we there was the one day on the entire shoot we went over. Um, and we had got done all the dialogue, which there was a ton of it. And then we had a gunfight, but we didn't have enough time to do the gunfight that as I wanted to. So I do this thing that my friend David's like, he's like, I can tell when you're thinking, you stare off into space for 5 minutes and you come back with like all your solutions. I literally had to rewrite, reshoot, and recut the scene in my head in 5 minutes. And that's just something I am okay with doing. And so that's exactly what happened. And honestly, you watch the scene, you could never tell that it was supposed to be something different. It's just, yeah, I think just being able to roll with the punches and solve problems quickly.
Was there another hard day on set like that? Like, was there any days where you came close to thinking, like, there's no way we're going to finish this?
I would say that was one of the hard days on set because one of the actors showed up and they weren't really prepared. So we were really having to struggle. And that was normally what would happen. Like the hardest days on set were like, oh, an actor shows up and they're in the wrong headspace. Like at one point, a different actor showed up. He auditioned very well, showed up on the day, could not remember more than a sentence at a time. He was snapping at people. He was getting really frustrated. I ultimately had to let him go. And I think that was when I think those were like the hardest days because I will prepare within an inch of my life and I can also um adapt really quickly. But if an actor shows up and they are not feeling it, they're not there, it's like, okay, I can carry you over the finish line, but this is going to be an absolute nightmare. Um, but the fun thing is, the scene that we shot where we were really struggling, I don't know how I pulled it off, but I cut the scene together, sent it to my assistant editor, who was great feedback. And that was the one scene he came back, he had no feedback. He's like, no, this is great. This is a really great scene. Like, how? I didn't tell him off. I didn't tell him in advance, like this day was a nightmare. Like, nope, he thought it was great. And so like cool. The magic of editing prevailed again.
So you talked about your crew size a little bit, but tell me a little bit about your cast and crew size and like what positions on set did you have and what positions do you wish you would have had if you had a bigger budget?
I would say generally there were never more than 4 or 5 people on set at any given time. In many cases, we only had like 2 or 3 actors max, and oftentimes like 2 or 3 people behind the camera. Sometimes it would just be me. So I would just be like doing the lighting, monitoring the sound, operating the camera, sometimes 2 cameras, putting out the craft services, vacuum that gets no, didn't do that. But that was actually kind of where the production method came in. So because I was using wireless labs with the actors, we didn't have to have a boom operator. And also, especially once I got the more advanced pair that could actually record locally to the little capsule that was on their body, I could sit there and just monitor the sound from the receiver while also filming. The lighting, oftentimes, like if I had another person there, they'd be either oftentimes they were the second camera operator. They would also help with the lighting. The final day, I actually had, I want to say 2 other people behind the camera with me, which was helpful because I was because you have that time like, okay, let's set up just some little art design, set up the lighting. That just kind of takes a lot of stress off of you. But I have noticed, I've worked on projects with bigger crews, and sometimes the bigger the crew, the slower everything moves. Whereas because we were small and because everything was pretty efficient, we were able to move extremely fast. Like sometimes knocking out between 8 to 10 pages per day, in just a 9-hour day. And if I had to go back, like I think I would have liked to have had at least 1 or 2 extra PAs just so that I wouldn't have to worry about doing as much on my own. But I can't really see going with the 30, 40 person crew on a project like this. But I'd say with the actors, yeah, normally because it was actually set in 2020. I think the most number of actors we ever had in a scene was 3. For the most part, everybody, and usually it was about 2.
How many days did you end up shooting this entire film?
I'm trying to, I want to say maybe like 20 to 25 full days. So we filmed a lot at night, and I had a policy because everybody has day jobs, everyone has families, everyone's got, this isn't their career, right? So I didn't want to keep people out to like 2, 3, 4 a.m. So like I had a hard out. We wrap at 11:30. Does not matter. Like that, and then that's it. And we always wrapped at 11:30 without fail. So I kind of treat those as like half days. So we'd like shoot for like 4 or 5 hours at a time. So we had like a handful of full like 9 hour days, and the rest of it was just, we'd go out and shoot with as much nighttime as we could get, which is oftentimes going to be about 5 hours. There's a fight scene that happens in a tunnel where it's pretty acrobatic. Like it's the where, it's the main character fighting a guy doing capoeira, and we shot the whole thing in 4 hours, which, it's fun telling people that because it's like, especially people who do fight scenes, like there's no way you couldn't possibly have done it in 4 hours. Yeah. We did it because we had to. But then there was the final fight where it's 5 minutes long, and we shot it over the span of 2 full days. So I think in hindsight, it was shot over the span of 2 years. In hindsight, it would have been a lot better. It would have been a lot more pleasant to have just like shot it all at once and do full days. In fact, I would love to do that in the future. But when everybody's more or less is kind of, we all have our lives outside of that. I did my best not to I did my best not to, do the whole 16, 17 hour days or keep people out super late. And that probably led to more actual like coming out shoot days.
So, with your budget, where did you primarily allocate all of your resources to?
Probably locations, props, and food. Um, there was like there were I learned, listening to like interviews and commentaries like of filmmakers using Airbnbs in place of, uh basically bogarting friends' houses and apartments. And so a fair amount of these locations with the Airbnb, this like we found a big barn where they hold weddings, which was fun to shoot around. There's also just like a big storage warehouse. And so, though, that was kind of where a fair amount of money went. There's also just lots of prop weapons, just, and also making sure like on set, feeding people well. You have people there for, it's effectively a work day. So the last thing you want is to have them show up like, here's a bowl of peanuts and a bunch of bottles of water. So I might have gone a little bit overboard with feeding everybody, but honestly, I never really saw a problem with that. Better to feed people too well than skimp on something like that.
So, you were talking about the locations a little bit, but one thing that I found really impressive with your film is that like I've tried to shoot action stuff in the past and it's never really looked very great, mostly because I'm just shooting it in like my parents' backyard or something, right? But you're like, I saw some scenes in what looked like parking garages and, the locations you mentioned, you're filming like in the street, in the city, and stuff like that. And then just like the action, like is so well directed, like it doesn't look cheap, right? Which is obviously very important. So I'm curious your take, like what's your advice as far as like making a smaller production feel bigger and not, especially when it comes to an action film, just not making it look cheap?
The way I learned to make movies was I didn't have a community around me. I didn't have another filmmaker I could go and work with and talk to. So what I did was I would watch movies, listen to DVD commentaries, special features, and I would reverse engineer the techniques I was seeing in Hollywood movies. So at one point in the movie where I'm just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna try to do Michael Bay shots. Just that crazy, like super long lens orbit shot. And it's literally just like, I have the camera on a gimbal with 85 millimeter lens, and I'm zooming in even more in post to create that effect. I think a lot of it's just, where my headspace was. I didn't start with, well, here's the proper way of doing something. I started with, here's this really cool thing that this person with way more money than I have can do. So how do I do that with my little, like, rinky dink production? And so I kept on looking at, like, the lighting was also really important. Having like really cool kind of like almost film noir style lighting. Being sure to try to get ambitious with camera techniques, like the doing the Michael Bay shot, or just knowing how to stack people properly during a fight scene, or just any number of things. I think a lot of it's just, you know I I could almost say I learned filmmaking wrong, because I just learned to reverse engineer stuff and kind of put my own spin on it. But yeah, I think that's really what kind of helped, was I wasn't thinking from the perspective of somebody with $10,000. I was thinking from the perspective of someone who was trying to mimic $100 million, and kind of and work backward from there.
So, how did you handle it? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you said you worked with a lot of non-professional fighters. I'm assuming that was a handful of your actors. How did you handle that? Because that's another thing that could definitely kill kind of like the fights, right? If an actor just isn't able to sell it. So what's your advice there?
What's really funny is there's one fight in the movie where the actor, he was great as a character. He could not do fight scenes. I think he saw the listing and thought, oh, a fight scene, I'll just like throw a punch or maybe block. Like, no, dude, you're gonna be doing like jump kicks and using a knife. And one of the things I got really good at was, like, I was really good at camera work and editing. And so I was able to kind of almost shoot around or use the camera to accentuate his movement. So he does like a jump kick, which on set looked terrible. I'm not gonna lie, it looked awful. But because of the way that I was able to shoot it, I was able to, like, the camera was able to kind of give him a boost. And when I showed it to my wife, she's like, "Oh, that guy, is he like another action guy? Because that was really good." I'm like, "Oh, you have no idea. The dude's like not a fight, he's not a screen fighter at all." I just got really good of like working over the years with people who are like really high level and that were very good at what they do, and people who are just beginners, and understanding, like, yeah, sometimes you just have to know the right camera techniques and editing techniques to kind of give them the boost and kind of mask some of their shortcomings. So if anybody did, it would take a lot for me to be like, all right, we need to like cut this or change this, because the camera work could account for a lot. Um, my one thing is I don't like, I often tell the actors that the saying, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So don't move so fast that your form starts to break down and you start to look messy. Because if that happens, all I can do is like Jason Bourne cut around it. It just becomes like 500 edits in like 2 seconds. Whereas if it's slow, I can speed it up. I can cut frames. You do a lot. I was coming with like 15 years of experience at that point. So I knew how to I knew how to make my actors look really good. Even this, regardless of their skill level. But if it looked too bad, then it's either getting cut or it's getting cut up. And so I'm glad we were able to avoid that in most every instance.
Do you think $10,000? I mean, we all wish that we had more money, right? But do you think $10,000 was enough, or do you wish you had like double that? And what would you have even done if you had like 20 grand to make this instead?
I don't even know, man. I think some of those set pieces that had to be removed might have still wound up in the movie. But a little part of me, and this is gonna sound insane, a little part of me wants to try to make an action feature for 5,000 and see what that's like. Because I feel like the pandemic kind of added a little bit to the budget, right? It's you look at like the Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, it has like almost a $300 million budget, which is insane, but that's because of COVID. All of these like lockdown era movies cost so much more because of just concerns and considerations for COVID. So I wonder, going in, having learned everything I learned making that movie, could I make something as enjoyable for literally half the budget that I had to work with before? Like I'm not gonna lie, like I don't have anyone who's made a feature will tell you like you're not the same filmmaker when you get done. It changes you. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. There are some people they make their first feature and then they just bounce. Like I get that because it's a lot of work. But for me, it was the best film school you could ask for. I think I learned more working on that movie than I had in the previous decade of filmmaking. And so I just really think I could take that knowledge and apply it to the next one. So I could make a 10,000 another if I had made another $10,000 movie, it would be even more impressive and more polished because of just the things that I learned and the growing pains that I had.
So I'm assuming the $10,000 is probably just for production, right? Like that's none of your post production costs or anything.
Nope, that was nope, that was all of it. So post-production was interesting. Um, so I did almost everything. Did the editing, color grading, did the sound work. YouTube is a great resource for learning how to do all those things. And the music was the entire soundtrack was made using a software called Filmstro, which I got like I think for $200 I got like a lifetime like full pro level membership to it. And Filmstro is great because it's got hundreds of tracks, but every track you get it has like three different sliders, and you can use it to adapt the music to the scene with the intensity. You can also like turn certain channels on and off. So I was able to use it for say the main villain. I wanted him to have a consistent theme that could evolve depending on what was going on. So I was able to kind of create themes for certain characters. You had like leitmotifs for like what was going on, and once again, it's like an entire soundtrack for $200. I was editing in DaVinci Resolve, which I got for free with my Blackmagic camera. And that is incredibly powerful software, especially when it comes to color grading. I noticed once I switched from Premiere, my movie started looking way better because I suddenly had just better tools. And so yeah, post it still cost money, but not as much as it could because I was prepared to be the masochist who edited a full feature.
One of the big points that I try to recommend to filmmakers is marketing. And I don't know if this is a marketing move, but you have one of the most unique things I've done one of the most unique things I've ever heard when it comes to making a film is that you adapted this movie into a Game Boy Color game, correct?
Yes, I did.
So how did that even come about?
I've been a gamer for longer than I've been a filmmaker. I think I've been a filmmaker since I was 10 and a gamer since I was 5. And so as I was making the film, I think I was in post, I had this crazy idea. Hey, I wouldn't it be neat to have like just a game adaptation because you don't really see game adaptations of movies much anymore. Hollywood kind of abandoned that. And so during post, I would just do research to figure out like, oh, what kind of game I want to make. I was studying other movie-based games from the last several decades, from like the Atari 2600 all the way up to now. And I think I also partly did it as a way to distract my brain and keep me sane while I was editing the movie. But eventually I settled on this software called GB Studio, which you can use to make a legit Game Boy or Game Boy Color game that will play on real hardware. And so, as I'm editing, doing research on game design and, research on the software and what it's capable of, making a Game Boy Color game is kind of like making an action movie for $10,000. You do not have enough resources to actually do it. But if you get really creative with those resources, you can create the illusion that you did. And so that was like really, really fun. So I got done making the movie. It was released in January of 2024. And I figured, all right, now I'm gonna take a week off, which is a bad idea. I should have taken way more time off and get to work, learn it like to make the game. And I pounded my head against a wall for the next 4 months. I was not getting a pro. I could not wrap my head around the software. I was struggling with just the most basic stuff. Turns out I was way more burned out than I realized. So, um, at one point, I'm just like, all right, I guess I'm just gonna have to. This isn't gonna happen. I guess it's gonna give up. And before I did, just as a Hail Mary, I went on to Fiverr and I typed in GB Studio, and a couple names popped up. And one of those names was I recognized because I played a couple of his games. They were really, really cool. So I reached out to him, not really committed to doing anything, just to find out what was going on. He's a very good salesman. So within 20 minutes, we were making a game together. So, like, okay, well, I guess I need to learn how to do a design document. I have to figure out what's going to happen with like the gameplay, the characters, all that stuff. So I basically got to work figuring out like, okay, how do I want to make this? How closely do I want to follow the story of the movie? I kind of chopped the story up and moved it around so as to make it a better gaming experience. I made it so that two characters who are at odds for most of the movie team up from the start, so that way you have two characters to play as. And I also added one level, like almost like a gift to myself of like, I could never have done this on an indie budget, but I can do this in 8-bit where um you start this level fighting on top of a moving tractor trailer as like dudes and a bunch of guys and bats are attacking you from all angles. And you fight off like 10 of them, and suddenly the level boss comes up and knocks you off the truck. You fall onto a moving car, and then you have to jump from car to car as you catch back up with the truck to fight the level boss. For obvious reasons, you can't do that in a $10,000 movie, but it's my favorite level of the entire game. It's also the level that tends to destroy people because it's really hard. But yeah, a lot of this is like, oh, how do I how yeah, okay, we have these characters. I sent the programmer and artist, here's pictures of the actors. He would send back like little 8-bit interpretations of those people. They're adorable. It looks really fun. I had to figure out like, well, how do I want these characters to play? How do I want them to react? So literally it was like about like a month of back and forth where, he would send me builds and I would test them out, see what works, see what doesn't work, um, make tweaks, make improvements. Then I went and I found a musician who's based out of Argentina, and I'd sent him a bunch of tracks from the movie to adapt into Game Boy music, and he did a really good job actually. I gave him a tall order, so I'm really impressed with what he was able to do. But once it all came together and got to play it, like, okay, for me, it was actually pretty easy because I've played it to death. But I got to see a Let's Play where some kid just tried to play it and got absolutely annihilated by the fourth level. Like, sorry, man. That's a tough one. Then I see another person play it and they get through the game, almost the entire game without getting hit. So it's, I guess, the different vintage of player. But the cool thing is, it's actually about to get a physical release in the next month or so from a company called Project Retro Games, and it's gonna come, have the cartridge box. It's gonna come with a poster. There's gonna be a limited run of 500. But what was exciting for me is the first 50 units are gonna come with a VHS copy of the movie. And when Carlos, the guy who owns the company, pitched it to me, I'm like, wait, what? Are you kidding? Why? He's like, dude, anyone buying a Game Boy game in the year 2025, they are the same people who were buying VHS in 2025. And it got me thinking and looking around like, well, what else is there? Oh, Alien Romulus had a limited VHS release that sold out in a day, despite the fact that it cost $60 a tape. So there is it's kind of wild that like, okay, there's a market, like, and this is a very 90s style action movie. It's kind of it's like a 90s style action movie set in 2020. And so like, okay, this is kind of perfect. And so I wanted to kind of, pitch him like, well, could we like could put like a coupon for like a personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut, really make it extremely authentic, make it super 90s. Carlos is from Brazil, so we had like fun talking about the different gaming experiences. Brazil gaming in Brazil was way different from the US because of like tariffs and whatnot. but I told him about this game called Gunstar Heroes that literally came with a fruit roll up in the box, and that he found that very impressive. There's probably like sealed copies out there with just like a rock hard fruit roll up still inside of it, just mummified. But yeah, that's extremely exciting. I don't know if it moved the needle as far as marketing goes, but frankly, it was very creatively. It kind of like creatively recharged me because I didn't realize how burned out I was, and doing the game was like, wow, I feel so much better now. I didn't realize just how much making the movie kind of wrecked me. And since then, I made a game based on a movie I'm going to start production on next year, and I'm in the planning stages of a third game that is based on an idea that I would love to turn into a movie someday, but it's going to require a bit more budget than Lost Phoenix.
So you told me you landed distribution through Indie Rights, which is super awesome. Why did you end up landing on them, and what kind of surprised you most about the distribution process as a whole?
I was an avid listener to Indie Film Hustle. I think about once a year, Alex would have Linda Nelson on to talk about distribution and where things are going, what the market's looking like. And every time I would love listening to interviews with her because her insight was always fascinating. And Indie Rights had a really great reputation. So I think that there may have been other possible like maybe I'll go somewhere else, but I was always pretty much have my heart set on them. And so when they accepted the film, that was great. I love the fact that every quarter I get, I would get a report of not just my film, but the thousand or so other films that they also distribute. So I can kind of get a better sense of, what's being successful and how are they successful, and also get a better sense of like, well, how does my film stack up against kind of what's happening with everyone else. She also sends out a newsletter which gives, pretty frank, but also really detailed information about like just the kind of the state of the industry. And so that was, I mean, honestly, I love working with them. They've been awesome so far. Uh, if I have any questions, I get answers back pretty quickly. And it doesn't feel like they're ever keeping information. Like it feels like no, they want to share this. They want to create a community among their filmmakers, and that has been extremely helpful. One thing that was a bit of a bummer, I would say, was learning just how hard it is to get people to watch your movie, and just how many people need to watch your movie to recoup the budget of even a modest film like Lost Phoenix. I went in kind of with limited expectations, and I came out of the what I learned was very sobering. It's like, okay, it's hard. It's really, really difficult. And it's kind of I'm happy that I made this movie without going into debt. I didn't max out my credit cards to do it. So thank God for that. Because if I had, or I had, like an investor breathing down my neck, I think I'd be way more stressed out. But right now it's like, okay, it's not, it, it's pretty difficult, but I'm also now like, oh, let's learn about, I get to learn more about foreign distribution and VHS, and, you know, learn about like, well, how much do these services pay out? What can you make per thousand ad hits? And, like, can you get like, how do we get it into dubbed into foreign languages? So now I'm kind of almost treating this as the ultimate learning material. I have this movie, it's out, I can use it to learn, just learn and grow. That way I can kind of make smart decisions on the next movie. And just all the data that Indie Rights provides, all the knowledge they provide, just makes that even better.
So how is it? I know you talked about how it's, not very, it hasn't paid very well, but I guess compared to your budget, how has it done so far?
So we're still a ways from break even. Debating like, so I would talk more about exact numbers, but I'm actually kind of saving that for another project I'm doing later. But I will say that yeah, I was surprised by just how little streamers pay out. and which streamers, and also getting to see how different things affect the industry. Like last year, Disney Plus, Netflix, yeah, Max, not Adobe, like Amazon Prime, not Adobe Premiere. Um, they all introduced ad tiers to their services. And so all these companies that they had to suddenly stretch their budgets across more platforms, which kind of led to a across the board drop in revenue for indie filmmakers. I started seeing it with people who were on Film Hub first, and then because um our reports are a bit delayed, and it's like, wow, it was a pretty brutal year to release an indie film because there's a lot of movies coming out, but also the ad budgets were kind of like thrown into chaos because of all these bigger streaming services now suddenly having ads. So yeah, I think in a way it just kind of in a way like it kind of took the wind out of my sails because I wanted to make bigger movies going forward, and now it's like, well, okay, you know, if I wanted to do that, how would I go about that? I would have to find investors. I would have to do more crowdfunding to make it happen because I couldn't necessarily responsibly like go into debt to make a movie that will ultimately like lose money. It's but at the same time, it's also only been a year. You can sell your movie forever, and for as long as there are screens, you can keep your movie in circulation. So I have faith that it's gonna take a while, but I have faith that we'll get to break even at some point.
So, what's one thing you wish someone would have told you before you made this film?
So that is a good one. Also, a relatively tough question. I think I wish someone would have kind of told me a bit more about the challenges of marketing. Like, I look back on making the movie, I don't have any regrets. I would have done it all the same way because even the stuff that didn't quite work out, I learned a lot from. And the movie, like, ultimately came out. It was like people who watch it find it very entertaining. So, like, hey, that's the win that I was looking for. But I wish I had known more about what it takes to market a movie in advance. Like my first push in marketing didn't quite go that well, I don't think. And so that was like, January, February, March of last year. And now it's like, well, maybe I was going on movie podcasts, and it always kind of felt surface level, but now going on to podcast, like more filmmaking focused podcasts, like, yes, this is great. Let's like really dig into the minutia of making this movie, and also just having more in-depth discussions about it. So I wish I had known that a year ago. I would have probably pursued more filmmaking podcasts as well.
So, you told me before we started talking that quantity leads to quality, right? You've made a ton of short films before you started tackling your features. So, what's the most important thing you learned from making all of those shorts?
Don't be afraid to fail. That's kind of the beauty of making a ton of short films for little to no money, is the stakes are low. Like, yeah, you have very limited funds and resources, but you also have unlimited creative freedom. And so, a lot of those early shorts, you can kind of see the seeds that would the seeds of like technique and ideas that would wind up in Lost Phoenix. And so I feel like if I had not done all of that, if I had gone in like afraid, like, oh, what happens if this turns out badly, I might not have been quite as bold or adventurous. And so I'm glad I got to have that experience of, you know what? If this movie, we shot this movie in 2 days, if it doesn't turn out the way I wanted to, it's not the end of the world. I can just make another one next month. And so they're like, get to test out all these ideas, get to test out all these different production techniques. And so by the time I'm coming into Lost Phoenix, I had this pretty big bag of tricks, but also this almost this fearlessness. I was so accustomed to not being afraid of failing that I don't think I ever really I don't think I made very many fear-based decisions on the movie. I think a movie is better for it. So kind of get into that headspace of, you know, failure is the best teacher. and don't be afraid of it. Because if you spend the whole time just trying not to fail, you're never really going to succeed. You're never really going to get what you want out of it.
So you also told me that you're working on a documentary, and you kind of hinted at this a little bit, a documentary about micro-budget action cinema. What inspired this project, and what are you hoping to accomplish with it?
I spent half my life on Tubi, it seems, and they have all these really great documentaries about, like horror film and like direct-to-video horror and maybe even Australian films and whatnot. But I feel like micro-budget action cinema, because I've been part of this community since like 2003, 2004. I think it's so robust. It is very much its own thing. It's not like Hollywood. It's not like Hong Kong. It's very unique. And I have, I have friends who, other friends who have done this. I really would love for people to get to see how unique this is, that these movies that most people think should not exist or even be possible, how they can actually be really good, and just kind of celebrate the people who made them, but also hopefully inspire others. Like, yeah, you don't have to have this massive budget. If you want to make an action movie, if that's really in your heart of hearts, if you want to make, you can do it. One friend of mine is like really, really in depth into Unreal Engine, which I think might unlock the ability to like, to make, almost mini blockbuster style movies, because just the power of that software is really impressive. But yeah, ultimately I just wanted to be kind of like shed light on this, and just like an entire kind of almost different subculture of filmmaking that really doesn't get a lot of appreciation. And also, yeah, just inspire people to like pick up a camera, go make something, but be safe about it. Don't injure your crew or your cast. That's not, there's a certain amount of recklessness that you really should try to avoid.
So I want to try something different here to wrap this up. I haven't ever done rapid fire questions, but I figured I'd try something different. So I'm curious your take on all of these. You hinted at this a little bit earlier, but what's harder, making a movie or selling a movie?
Selling a movie.
Fight scenes or dialogue scenes? Which one's tougher to shoot on a tiny budget?
Fight scenes.
Game Boy or N64?
Oh, God. Gonna say N64.
Fair. One piece of gear you couldn't live without on set?
Aside from the camera?
Yeah, let's go aside from the camera.
Aside from the camera. Oh, wow. I would say my wireless lav system.
Very fair. If you could steal one actor from a Hollywood movie to be in your 10K film, who would it be?
Oh, man. I would steal Scott Adkins.
All right. Craziest thing you've ever had to fake because you couldn't afford it?
Craziest thing I ever had to fake.
Throwing an action scene on a Game Boy game because you couldn't do it in real life, maybe?
Yeah, I know. That would definitely be wild. Yeah, I'm kind of like, yeah. Showing a character firing a gun in public while never actually having a gun out in public.
That's very fair. More nerve-wracking, first day on set or first time showing the film to an audience?
First day on set.
If you could hand a 10K check to any filmmaker today, who would you give it to?
I'd probably give it to Robert Rodriguez just to see if he still got it.
I think he's actually taking money now from people too, so that you could make that a reality.
I did see that. I'm intrigued to see how that turns out.
Yeah. Best piece of advice you've ever gotten about filmmaking, even if you didn't listen to it right away?
You can have you have a choice: fast, cheap, and good. You can only have two.
Would you rather spend another year making a 10K action film or make a $1 million drama film that you don't care about?
Another 10K action film. Easy.
One question I always like to ask at the end: if you could be a fly on a wall for one production, which film would you choose?
Oh, like any film throughout history,
Any film.
I would probably want to be a fly on the wall for something like Hard Boiled.
Okay. James, thank you so much for coming on today. This was awesome. I mean, I look forward to, I haven't seen the film yet. I'm definitely going to watch it, but I look forward to just everything that you do here in the future. Definitely keep me up to date on the documentary. I would love to check it out whenever you finish it. But where can people see the film and learn more about you?
So this film is available on Tubi, Fossum, Amazon Prime, Google. It's on. It is on YouTube. The censored version is on YouTube. It's called the No F's Given version because I had to remove all of the spicier language to get it on there. And you can learn more about me. IMDb. I am on Instagram and Blue Sky mostly, and occasional contributor to Film Combat Syndicate. And yeah, just keep an eye out because hopefully I'm getting this documentary off the ground before too long.
I want to give another huge shout out to James for coming on the channel and speaking so candidly with me. I mean, I think it's incredible that, he's just made so many action films in general, but that he was able to stick with making this film and doing it for such a low budget. I mean, we'll post the, trailer and all that in the description. So definitely check it out. It definitely doesn't feel like something that you made for $10,000. Again, all of James' stuff will be linked in the description if you want to check that out. And I've never really done this before, but if you're interested in being interviewed on this channel, I just want to let you know that I'm open to doing that. James actually reached out to me on an Instagram DM. My DMs are open, my email's open. As far as guests that I'm looking for, obviously I prefer if you had a finished film, even if it's not within distribution yet, just so we have something to talk about. But if I can find an angle in your story that I feel would be useful to you, the audience, then I'm definitely interested in talking with you. Again, you can feel free to hit me up on Instagram or my email's in the description. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you can see more awesome interviews just like this one. I'll have a couple more linked somewhere on screen here in a second. Of course, my feature film, Cashing Out, will be linked in the description if you want to help support me and the channel. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.